Hey, welcome to the DBC Inc. Facebook Live. It's Thursday night, free professional development right here. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. First thing you can do is jump over into those comments. Let us know who is here, where you're from, and anyone who enters a comment, you'll be also entered to win a free book. So every single week, we give away a free book to people that tune in and leave comments on the Facebook Live. So make sure you jump in there and leave that comment. Again, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and there you go. By the way, I am Dave. I'm coming to you from San Diego, California. It's pretty hot here right now. And so I'm in San Diego, California, and right after this Facebook Live, going to grab a little dinner and head out on a night run. Probably going to drive to the ocean and get my night run in down to the ocean again. I've kind of been obsessed of running at the waterfront lately. Kristen, #1 comment once again. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, see, now you're right. It's a challenge to be first. I've called you out as the most often first person in the chat. And so there you are. Good to see you. So everyone else, you can't be Kristen now, but you can be #2. You can be #3. We're all winners here. Dawn Harris. Thank you so much, Dawn, for joining us. All the way from Ohio. In the house. Super good to see you here. We are getting closer and closer to the release of Dawn's book, Plan Like a Pirate, which I'm super pumped about. And whew, man, I think I said on the last Facebook Live that I did that we the covers have come in, and I know Dawn has released the cover now, and it is gorgeous. It is beautiful. And so we just can't wait to release that book. So that's awesome. And the other thing that I want to tell you is if you haven't got a chance, make sure you get over to DaveBurgessConsulting.com and pick up the free course. We have a free course at DBC University, and Dawn is one of the people that created a video for that course. I created a video on my Play-Doh lesson, and so that's over there right there. And I believe we have a special guest who is joining us. Let's see who we have here.
Hey,
Nate.
How's it going, Dave?
How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Awesome. Good to see you.
And my dog is also here.
Oh yeah, well, I have a couple dogs around my feet here.
Yeah.
So Nate is joining us. Nate is the co-author of Ditch That Tech: Differentiated Instruction in a Digital World, and also we'll talk later about maybe a little new project that might be underway right now too.
Yes, that is also in the works.
Yeah, and so Nate, kind of for our audience here, why don't you kind of let us know where you're from and what your current status is in education?
Yeah, so currently, and again, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm a teacher in Avon, Indiana. So this will be my 8th year teaching now. And I got to start off in the SPED world, actually, and then kind of also majored in history. And so now after having kind of gotten my master's in history, and spending time doing that, I've kind of also been spending a lot of time doing things kind of centered around like tech and equity and UDL and things like that. And so Don't Ditch That Tech was actually a project of love with both my mom, who was my co-author on the project, and also Matt Miller, who's much more famous and much more talented than me in terms of the writing thing. So since that time, yeah, I've just been kind of cruising on that, and then also the new project that I'm working on. So
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and so this book, I think that is one of the unique things about this book is that you wrote it with your mom. You don't see that every day, right?
I know, yeah, it doesn't happen all the time.
Mother-son collaboration on a book project. That's super cool. Both of you and educators, different generations, same family, came together to write a book. And so I think probably a lot of people are curious about that process. How was that, getting a chance to collaborate with your mother to write a book?
It was actually really nice. You know, like it's always funny because we always joke that, people always think that we're a married couple whenever we like show up and present. It's it's always kind of a funny thing. But my mom and I, we, basically like my grandfather was a school superintendent. And so like I always, figured I was going to go into education some way. But she, like she has basically in her position that she does, she works for the University of Indianapolis and she teaches people how to be teachers. So when she was kind of working on some of her projects, this was right before the pandemic hit. we decided that, you know, like a lot of the work that we had done in our classrooms, and especially ones that were around kind of like a lot of our practices that were kind of centered around like ed tech. And then also I had become kind of more fascinated with the topic of differentiation. Is that I decided like, man, like nobody has written a book on how to use technology to differentiate. And I was like, man, there really should be something on this. And so my mom was actually the one who kind of connected me with Matt. And from there, then, you know, he's like, oh, like, yeah, we should make this a thing. And so that's kind of how we got the ball rolling. My mom had actually been following Matt around because my mom is by trade a Spanish teacher. They had been following each other around for years and kind of at conferences. And so that was kind of nice that they could then kind of all bring all three of us together to work on this project.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. And of course, Matt is such a wonderful guy. What a perfect guy to work with on it.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And so, like, you can't do any better than doing a project with Matt.
No, so, he's been good to collaborate with.
Yeah, and so by the way, Sean, thanks for joining us. Tara, I see Tara is here. Tara has joined us as well, and so we really appreciate all of you joining in and tuning in to us tonight. Again, anyone who leaves a comment over there on the side, you'll be entered to win a book. And the book that you will win is Nate's book. Don't Ditch That Tech. Don't Ditch That Tech. Which is fantastic. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention about Don't Ditch That Tech, Nate, is when you wrote this, you probably had no idea how important it was going to be because this came out pre-pandemic. But then when everybody got thrown into a remote situation, Don't Ditch That Tech and how to differentiate instruction in a digital way using technology became like the most important thing in education almost. And so kind of what was that process for you connecting around this message once the pandemic hit?
It was actually really strange. Like it was just odd to have like, you know, again, this was back in, this was back in, oh my goodness, I want to say the book came out in June or July, right, of 2019. And so it was like 6 months before the pandemic hit, give or take, or really, you know, got going. And then when March came around, like it was just, it's been a kind of a strange experience is how I would put it. And for me personally, like as the pandemic has continued on and everything, the book for me has represented a lot of different things. I think, you know, for example, like when everybody went to emergency, like remote learning, that really wasn't something that we were addressing in the book because, and I basically how I can explain this very quickly is like, there's a big difference between emergency remote teaching and actual like good, like digitized instruction. And so, sorry, apologies for my dog. We're still a puppy, and the pandemic has hit us very hard.
We're the dog lovers at DBC. It's all good.
Oh yeah. You know, again, like our book was there, and I hope, and my hope for it as time has gone on, as people have gotten more used to having more technological elements present in their instruction. You know, EdTech has become, again, so integral to everything that we do now that we're starting to have some of these conversations about like, okay, maybe besides like now that we've got, you know, devices in kids' hands, like we need to have an honest conversation about how they should be like appropriately used to actually meet students' needs. We just can't have this like, oh, great, you know, they've got them, so now we're done. Like there's such a, that is such a, like just a very first step look into how to use technology. And so for me currently now, you know, I'm looking back at the book and I'm like, man, like, I think there is more of a need now than ever to not go back to this like this return to normalcy that a lot of people that I see like talking about, like things should just go back to normal, like it'll be great. Like no, actually, like we need to like continue to keep pushing the envelope on, especially like, you know, how to use technology appropriately and effectively in the, you know, in the classroom in ways that actually is transformative for our students and teachers.
Yeah. Now, I noticed that another thing that happened during the pandemic is that it appeared that you got a chance to collaborate with Stacy Roshan.
Yeah.
To put together some resources for educators. And maybe if you could say a little bit about that and where people could go to access that.
Yes, I will actually, I'll put it right here in the chat, and then if you want to repost it for everybody, I know that Streamlabs has some nice, you know, features there where you can put a link up there. So I think this is the bit.ly, if I got that correct. So it's just bit.ly/flipped ebook. So yeah, so Stacey Roshan, she's the author of Tech with Heart, fantastic educator. Highly recommend you check her out. She's incredibly caring and does really good work. She and I, this is back in, oh goodness, March. I hit her up because we had both kind of published right around the same time, our books. And I knew about a lot of the good work that she was doing with Flipgrid and things like Pear Deck and things like that in her classroom. And I was like we need to make something, because I was, again, sitting here in March. This is just before this is the very beginning of March when this happened. And I was like, man, like, we need something out there, because I could like feel that something was going to happen. And so we published this ebook now, which is in its 3rd edition. And it is a resource for flipped asynchronous and remote teaching. And it is full of stuff. It's got resources on, you know, using, you know, like technology for the first time. It's got everything from like getting connected with a more like global PLN to help support you on your, you know, kind of on your ed tech journey. We dumped in tons of resources and tutorials on how to use Edpuzzle, Flipgrid, HyperDocs, you know, things that educators, you know, could use regardless of what platform Microsoft or, you know, Apple or Google or whatever system you're using, that they could make use of. So we basically wanted to make this as accessible and as open as we can to people. And I think so far, it's been a few months since I checked, but it's been downloaded. The ebook has been like at least first downloaded around like 10,000 times. So it's been, yeah, it's been a really, really good experience. And she's, again, I highly recommend you check her out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't think of two better books for the moment with the kind of situations that people are in. With Tech with Heart and Don't Ditch That Tech. Both of them go hand in hand and work perfectly. And her work with how to really empower student voice through technology is fantastic stuff. So the fact that you all came together and created this resource for teachers is fantastic. So if you're out there and you have not gone to download that yet, it's there for you to access, and it's put together by, you know, these great people. And so we hope that you'll go check it out and take a look. And I see that like Kristen and Don both have said like, hey, like absolutely high fives on this whole idea of like, let's not go back to normal. We might want to go back to normal as far as no pandemic, of course, but let's not go back to normal as far as doing instruction the way that we always did before. Well, let's take some of these lessons that we've learned and come back with something which is going to be an improved model, something that moves us forward rather than takes us back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Matt has this really good saying, you know, Matt Miller has this really good saying, like, you know, the riskiest kind of teaching is the kind that doesn't take any risks at all. And like, if we're not willing to push the envelope and have like conversations about like, so for example, like the idea of like internet access, like that needs to have a really, really strong conversation, like with, you know, communities and schools and, you know, local businesses about, you know, being the idea that, like internet access is kind of a, like, it's a rights and an equity issue, right, in the classroom. So there's things I think certainly out of this that we like have to take very seriously and kind of take a hard look at and question.
Yeah, there's certainly some areas where, although they were always there and there have always been people talking about it, the pandemic really shined a light on it and like kind of brought it out into the open, just how important some of these issues are, like the access as being super important. I want to say hi to Monica. Monica just joined us, wishing us a happy Thursday. Happy Thursday right back to you, Monica. We appreciate you jumping in here. And so, Nate, before we talk about this project that you're working on now, I was wondering if you have any particular strategies based on either Don't Ditch That Tech or what you're working on now, anything that practical takeaways that you might want to share with us.
Yeah, so there's a couple I definitely recommend. One is I would highly encourage again, like just as a general practice, now is really the time for us to be very reflective as educators, to really, go for what, Paulo Freire calls praxis. Like we have our practices and then we reflect upon them and then we make good changes. But, inside of that lens, there's a big kind of push that I'm currently writing about, and I'm actually kind of heading towards this, in my current chapters that I'm writing. There's something called a cloned classroom model, where the idea that you can have kind of a parallel experience as much as possible for your students, that if a student comes into my classroom, they're going to have that normal physical experience with me, right? And it's going to be all the good quality good quality educational strategies and pedagogies that we always implement, right? But then kind of this idea of a cloned classroom model is, instead of there was always this model out there called flipping a classroom, which is always, it's been around for a while. It's kind of been, bouncing around out there. It's a whole idea, like you have your direct instruction be at home. Well, I've thought about that and was like, well, why don't we just make it so that anything can be done anywhere? And that's kind of the whole idea of the cloned classroom model for me, that I'm currently kind of sketching ideas about, is that why don't we make it as close as we possibly can, that if a student can't be with us for whatever reason, that they can get as close as possible an equitable educational experience at home. And that means everything from collaborating with other students in class, to access to notes, to quizzes, to activities, to stations. And so I would encourage people to think about, and again, doesn't necessarily mean that we digitize everything, but it's that we think about things in a more accessible light that goes beyond just what our students can get inside of our 4 classroom walls. I kind of give a couple of bits of advice in the chapters that I'm currently writing. That way, one of the ways to do this is, for example, when I have parents and students all the time say hey, how do I get access to Schoology, or how do I get access to Canvas? Providing tutorials for your kids. I love to use IORAD in the classroom. It's a fantastic app. If you haven't heard of it before, it's spelled just how it sounds. And you can make and create and share tutorials with your kids and parents and families instantly. And what I've used it for is from everything from sub-plans, because when I'm not there, I can kind of, again, upload my, step-by-step process of learning, online, to if I need parents who, who need to know how to get to, their kids' grades, I can share that tutorial with them. And so that's just one way. And again, it's hard for us to be everywhere at all at once, right? But I think that's certainly a conversation we need to have.
Yeah. So I think that, thinking back to my teaching career, I struggled with how to deal with student absences.
Yes.
And still providing them some sort of access to, to what we had done maybe so powerfully in class, and knowing what I was giving them, and to replace it, couldn't even approach it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that now, when we have a situation where students are in and out for such long stretches of time and rotating in and out because maybe exposure to COVID or whatever it might be, it's really kind of forced the issue on this. But it's always been an issue. It's always been an underlying issue. And we're not serving the population that sometimes, for reasons outside of their control, do have to miss school.
I mean, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. How many versions of ourselves have we had to be making over the over the past few years? We have ourselves in the classroom, right? We have our sub binders, right, which you might occasionally have to pull out. We have our missing or late work versions of things. We have all these different copies of ourselves that we have to constantly keep updating, and it's exhausting. I mean, it's a huge time drain. And for me, as I've, because basically what I do is in the classes when I teach, I have everything as a hyperslide, and I run everything off of there in the classroom. And kids do, and if they're home, they do the exact same thing. And if they're missing, they do the exact same thing. And it saves me so much time. And for me, with everything that I have going on, I've got a little one and 2 dogs, and one is a puppy. So as you can see, she's very excited and eager and takes a lot of time. For me, and for every other educator out there, our time is so precious. And for me, that's the biggest thing, is also just preserving our collective sanity, is an important conversation to have.
Yeah. And well, and for a lot of educators, I mean, you see this kind of, if you're a teacher, you understand what I'm about to say, where sometimes it is way easier to go into school when you shouldn't really be there than it is to create and leave a sub plan and to deal with maybe the disaster that's going to happen, the cleanup you're going to have to do afterwards when you come back because of what happened with the substitute teacher and all of that.
Yeah.
You see teachers going in at the risk of their own health and others' health because it's like, man, the idea that I'm going to like leave this assignment for someone else to do is just not
and especially like right now there's like huge, my district has huge sub shortages. I mean, we had like, you know, like 20 teachers out. It was like this week or the week before. I mean, and then I'm like faced with even more difficult discussion that there may not even be a sub in my room. It might just be an administrator who, you know, is you know, who's, you know, checking in, you know, occasionally with kids. Like it's just not the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the sub issue right now is out of control. I just actually had an event cancel, a big conference I was going to be speaking at in Tennessee. I was going to do 2 dates in Tennessee. One of them was a big conference, and the conference had to cancel. And the conference didn't cancel because of any restrictions. The conference had to cancel because teachers can't get out for professional development days.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because they don't have any subs to cover them because the subs are covering, there's a shortage of subs and they're covering for other reasons. And so they can't get any conference enrollment because nobody can get a release day.
Exactly.
And so definitely this year is a tough call on subs for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's and ultimately it's the same thing our students are running into too, right? It's like where I mean, last year I had portions of where 60% of my students were out because of positive cases or quarantines, and so all of a sudden, like now this need for like on-demand material, both for students and for teachers, right? Because like, you know, a lot of PD opportunities went remote, or you know, they canceled, you know, in-person ones. Like it's become, you know, kind of a need to, you know, get a hold of things, you know, very quickly if you're a student or a teacher.
Yeah. So for Monica, I am coming to Tennessee, Monica, but just for one date instead of two. It was going to be like I was going to be able to fit 2 into the same trip. I was super excited. One of them was going to be at a resort. Unfortunately, that's the one that canceled, but you know, that's the way that it goes. So Nate, before we get out of here, I'm pretty pumped about the new project that you're working on. And so if people have not read Don't Ditch That Tech, make sure you go out and get this. Again, it's perfect for the moment about how to differentiate instruction using technology through digital means. It's fantastic. But you have a new project. And so this is, we have an imprint of books with DBC pulled together by Matt Miller. So it's going to be on the Ditch That Textbook kind of imprint of DBC books. And we have the Do More with Google Classroom with Matt. And then this is going to be the next project in that line. And I know it kind of has a blockbuster theme and all that. So maybe kind of explain the concept behind the new project.
Yeah, absolutely. So me being a history nerd, I was like, man, like I need to do something that's kind of like historically inspired, you know, which of course, you know, Blockbuster came to mind. And this was actually a blog that I wrote back in like 2019 after I had published on Ditch That Tech, and I just kind of let it sit there for a while. And then I came back, so I was like, man, this could really be something. So the premise for the book is kind of like a meditation on what comes next after all these new inventions of ed tech. And also now the pandemic, like where do we go from here as educators, and thinking about some of these very important needs that we have, like, you know, like thinking about how we make content accessible, or, you know, like what the best practices are for our students. And so what I kind of do is I take what I've kind of done with the book so far is it's kind of cut up into 3 chunks. So the first chunk is what I call like the movie theater model. So this is like or the Nickelodeon model, which is what movie theaters used to be called. And it was, you know, it's this idea of like a teacher being up at the front. And so we talk about, there are still some good moments for that. But now more than ever, like we need to kind of give movie theaters a serious update. Like, you know, we need to make things more interactive. We need to have an honest conversation about, you know, how much we're using our voices as teachers in the classrooms compared to, you know, highlighting what our students know and feel. And then I kind of go on to the next step in the middle for, and that's kind of Blockbuster. Blockbuster, the one of them that is remaining in the United States. by the way, really funny. You can learn about that Blockbuster by watching a documentary on Netflix, which is not at all ironic. Blockbuster kind of for me represents a lot of these like, practices that we thought were always going to be around in the classroom that are very traditional, and they kind of need some updates. So this is everything from using textbooks to homework to thinking about how we penalize students for late work. And what I do in the book is I dig into the actual research of what scholars say, and then we look at some practical advice. And then the last bit, the last chunk of it is Netflix. It's like, what's the next step as us as educators? And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with this cloned classroom model, where we think about education being more that you can access it anywhere, and that it's, readily on demand. It's tailored to you and your content, your interests. It's something where you can, all of a sudden now, you can open up a device anywhere and you can learn something very quickly and instantly. And our students, they learn that way now, right? We've entered the age of Netflix and TikTok and Hulu, and it's probably not going back to Blockbuster. So the question is then, like, how do we best meet our student needs if that's the way that things seem to be going? So that's what's in the book.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And what a wonderful conversation for the moment about, I love that idea. Hey, what's next? Like, here we are, we're in this transitional place. We're in this place where we're either going to go backwards or we're going to move forward. And we're kind of in this limbo right now with the pandemic. And I think it's really important to hold this conversation now on the front end of this, and is what's going to be next in education. So I can't wait for this book to come out. I think it's going to be super powerful. And even more powerful than the book, which is going to be powerful, is I think the conversation that it'll start. Yeah, and that's going to be what's super. That's what's going to be essential, that we talk about and collaborate about these ideas. Yeah. So,
and I would love to, of course, have people's feedback on it. If you go, so the website is breakingblockbuster.com. If you go there, you can actually grab the preface and read it for free and see where the book is kind of headed. There's a lot of community input that I'm getting on the book, and people, Stacy's writing a blurb for it. We just talked about her earlier. Matt's writing a blurb in it. I've got also Mr. John Caporio is out of California for Q. He's helping out some with it. So I'm really excited because it's going to feature so many different educators' voices from all across the country in terms of what they're doing to kind of move forward.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, so be on the lookout for that. And so that's going to be on the Ditch That Textbook line of Dave Consulting Incorporated. Again, make sure you go find Nate and Angie's book, Don't Ditch That Tech, the mother-son collaboration, which I certainly the only one on our line. I don't know too many other education books that have been written by a mother and a son, so it's unique in that way too. And to everyone who has joined us tonight, thank you so much. I see Amy has jumped in here. Amy, thank you for joining us as well. And for everyone, again, who's watching on the playback, we really appreciate you coming to our DBC Facebook Lives on Thursday. And Nate, it sounds like maybe you got a puppy that needs to get walked or something.
Yes, and little ones.
And little ones as well. And so we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much. And hello to your buddies there.
Yes, this is Booker.
Hey, thank you for joining us on our Facebook Live. All right, so to everybody, we really appreciate you, and we will see you next week. Thanks a lot, Nate.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.
You bet.